There's some unsettling news circulating within the highest levels of the Trump administration, pointing to yet another high-ranking figure who could soon find himself out of a job, lining up alongside others like Kristi Noem, Dan Bongino, and Pam Bondi, who have already been shown the exit. Fresh reporting from Politico has stirred up fresh speculation about which senior official might be next in line for dismissal, especially after the Pentagon chief, with full backing from President Donald Trump, removed the Navy secretary from his post. A well-placed source inside the White House shared with Dana Bash that FBI Director Kash Patel appears destined to become the next cabinet member to depart, describing it as inevitable. This anonymous insider, speaking carefully on a delicate topic, pointed to the FBI leader specifically, noting that a flood of unflattering headlines tied to him simply doesn't project the right image for someone at that level, and that the president has grown weary of the constant noise and disruption it creates. When you step back and consider the bigger picture, it feels quintessentially Trump-like in its ruthlessness. Here we have Kash Patel, a man who dedicated years to being one of the president's fiercest defenders and most reliable operatives on the outside. He authored the Nunes Memo, appeared on virtually every conservative podcast and Fox News segment imaginable to relentlessly attack the FBI, labeling former Director Christopher Wray as corrupt and accusing the entire agency of being weaponized against political opponents. He followed orders without hesitation, dismantling credibility where it suited the cause. Yet now, after all that unwavering service, thanks he gets is a calculated leak from within the White House to Politico signaling that he's about to be thrown to the wolves. The irony runs deep because the controversies swirling around Patel stem entirely from choices he made himself once in power. Or take the private jet situation, for instance. It's almost too on the nose to be real. Back in 2024, before assuming the role of FBI director, Patel appeared on Glenn Beck's show and sharply criticized Wray for what he called taxpayer-funded luxury travel, specifically ripping into the use of a government G5 jet for personal trips. He argued forcefully that no one needed such extravagance, suggesting perhaps it was time to ground that aircraft since each takeoff cost around $15,000. Fast forward to 2025 and into 2026, and the script has flipped dramatically. Patel has been documented making lavish use of a $60 million government jet for personal jaunts, including trips to Pennsylvania to watch his girlfriend perform the national anthem at a wrestling match, multiple round trips to Nashville in a single month, outings with friends to Scotland for golf, and even a flight to the Olympics in Italy, where footage captured him drinking beer in the U.S. men's hockey team's locker room amid an unfolding cartel-related emergency back in Mexico. What stands out even more is how, once journalists began monitoring his travel patterns through open-source flight data, Patel allegedly reacted with fury and dismissed a veteran FBI employee with 27 years of service who managed the Bureau's aviation unit. When questioned about these travels, Patel offered a defense that bordered on the absurd, essentially claiming that if he were truly misusing the resources, he would attend every one of his girlfriend's performances. Instead, he estimated his usage at only about 15% for personal reasons. Clarifying details emerged about visits to Nashville family holidays, birthdays, and a handful of shows. But the core message landed as a weak justification. Sure, there might be some excess, but it's not that bad because it could be worse. It's reminiscent of someone admitting to a minor theft while boasting they had the opportunity to take far more. And jet travel barely scratches the surface of the issues. In-depth investigations, such as one from The Atlantic drawing on conversations with 24 insiders, have painted a picture of excessive drinking, frequent unexplained absences, and a leadership style marked by chaos. The New York Times spoke with 25 sources who portrayed the FBI under Patel as directionless, with a director more focused on personal branding than effective management. Insiders described impulsive decisions issued without proper planning, leaving staff scrambling to catch up. Congressional findings echoed this, with agents reporting him as frequently missing in action. In an early address to field offices, he reportedly quipped that if staff enjoyed golf, hockey, fishing, or hunting, they would be seeing plenty of him. A casual remark that might play well in certain circles, but raises serious questions about priorities at the helm of the country's top law enforcement body. It's abundantly evident at this point that Kash Patel is struggling mightily in the role, overwhelmed by its demands and ill-suited for the responsibilities it entails. Yet the looming dismissal isn't solely about one individual's shortcomings. It reveals a deeper, more systemic dynamic at play in Trump's inner circle. This is the unspoken bargain the president extends to those who align with him. You will be leveraged for your utility as long as it serves his interests. But the instant you generate negative press, become a distraction, or tip the scales toward liability rather than asset, your time is up. Loyalty, no matter how fervent or how many bridges it burns, holds no lasting value once the costs outweigh the benefits. We've witnessed this cycle repeatedly. Think of Michael Cohen, who sacrificed everything in service. Jeff Sessions, Rex Tillerson, Mike Pence, Mark Milley, Bill Barr, and even Marjorie Taylor Greene. Each poured their energy into advancing the agenda, only to be cast aside when convenience dictated. For anyone still embedded in that ecosystem and starting to glance over their shoulder, the warning signs are unmistakable. The true takeaway from this administration isn't that steadfast allegiance earns lasting rewards. It's that such allegiance gets exploited and ultimately discarded when it no longer delivers. Patel invested years in undermining the FBI's reputation to please his people. Yet if the leaks prove accurate, his payoff is an orchestrated signal of impending removal. One can't help but acknowledge that this outcome aligns with the consequences of his own actions, but it also serves as a stark reminder for anyone tempted to view alignment with Trump as a sustainable strategy. How is that loyalty treating those who bet everything on it? This kind of political reality demands deeper reflection on power structures and personal ambition in today's divided landscape. Shifting gears here on Continental Briefing, I recently had the opportunity to speak with Virginia State Senator Louise Lucas, a key force behind the recent redistricting developments in her state that marked a significant victory for Democrats. Senator Lucas, thank you for joining the conversation. Your central involvement in that process was pivotal. What message do you have for Democrats nationwide in the wake of that success? She responded with the kind of straightforward resolve that cuts through the noise. Growing up facing bigger bullies in junior high taught her to punch back rather than shrink away. People elect leaders to advocate fiercely on their behalf, and yielding ground only leads to defeat, while pushing back delivers results. Right now, she emphasized, Democrats are positioned to reclaim congressional majorities if they commit fully to the battle. She urged more grassroots energy, calling on party members to either join the front lines or support those willing to lead the charge, as she herself intends to press forward without hesitation. When I pressed further on critics within the party, like Maryland Senate President Bill Ferguson, who see aggressive map drawing as descending into a harmful cycle, Lucas didn't mince words. She acknowledged the appeal of nonpartisan ideals, but stressed that history judges those who stand idly by when action is possible. To elected officials everywhere, she said shame on anyone who fails to seize this chance to safeguard democracy amid efforts to reverse hard-won progress. Current administration's approach leaves little room for passive good governance. Instead, it requires matching intensity with intensity to protect core institutions. I asked if she believes Democrats are increasingly accepting that deference to traditional norms must give way to forceful countermeasures. Her agreement was emphatic. She supports fair processes in principle, but recognizes the urgent need to counter unchecked power grabs that could consolidate authority in ways that sideline congressional checks. Republican counterparts, she noted, show little regard for broader public welfare, making temporary assertive steps necessary to restore balance. Turning to GOP voices who stayed quiet when Trump pushed for extra seats in Texas, but now decry similar moves in blue states like California and Virginia, as she called out the blatant double standard. They knew it was wrong then, she argued, and their selective outrage exposes a deeper pattern of self-interest that has left Congress ineffective and disconnected from constituents, earning widespread frustration, even from some within their own ranks. Looking ahead to looming challenges, like the Supreme Court case potentially weakening key provisions of the Voting Rights Act, which could erase dozens of seats, or the 2030 census that might shift electoral power toward traditionally red states. Lucas framed these as reasons to act decisively now. Without intervention, she warned, the erosion of democratic safeguards will accelerate, diminishing our collective capacity to resist. Everyone bears a responsibility to strengthen the nation and preserve its standing as a beacon of opportunity, and she wants history to record her efforts as those of someone who fought in the trenches when it mattered most. When I inquired about her support for nationwide independent redistricting reforms, she affirmed it strongly, lamenting that Congress had the chance in past sessions, including the 2021 Freedom to Vote Act, where Democrats unified but Republicans uniformly opposed it. Hypocrisy stings, especially as critics now clutch pearls over Democratic countermeasures after blocking bipartisan solutions. As a product of the civil rights era, Lucas draws from a lifetime of advocacy, vowing to resist any rollback of advancements, even if it means engaging without filters. Her social media presence has clearly resonated, drawing responses from Democrats across the country who appreciate the unvarnished authenticity. She encourages them to use platforms to demonstrate commitment to constituents, bypassing outdated methods, because direct, filter-free communication shows willingness to engage in the real fight, and that's precisely what the public craves. I noted how refreshing it is to see a leader embodying the proactive energy that many have long demanded from Washington, where officials often lag behind grassroots calls for boldness. Building on Virginia's win, what's the next arena where she's prepared to bring that same intensity? Lucas expressed readiness to travel anywhere needed to bolster fellow Democrats, underscoring the liberating power of standing firm. She feels invigorated and hopes others recognize that the only real risk is losing our democratic foundations entirely. On the rapid erosion of civil rights, voting protections, and election standards under an administration that appears to prioritize engineered outcomes over genuine accountability, she connected it directly to her background amid massive resistance in the South. Having fought for every gain throughout her life, she refuses to watch progress unravel and insists this moment demands full engagement from everyone, no sitting on the sidelines. For those too young to recall the struggles of the 1950s and 1960s, or even older observers who might assume stability will prevail, her perspective carries weight. This feels eerily cyclical, and ignoring the pattern's risks, passing diminished opportunities to future generations. She refuses to let that happen to her children and grandchildren, urging immediate involvement because the stakes affect everyone who keeps breathing in this country. What fuels her optimism amid the challenges? Waking each day committed to this cause for her family and the rising participation of younger generations, evident in her online following and engagements like her recent address at a state Young Democrats convention. She was struck by how they connected with her message of combativeness, undeterred by age or appearance. They seek leaders willing to enter the arena bare-knuckled if necessary. Ultimately, she's battling for her constituents, her Commonwealth, and the nation as a whole. It was an honor to hear her perspective, and her contributions to the Virginia victory feel indispensable. On Continental Briefing, conversations like this remind us why persistent voices matter in turbulent times. In reflecting on these intertwined stories of fleeting loyalty in one administration and determined resistance in another, it becomes clear that political survival often hinges less on blind allegiance and more on strategic courage to challenge the status quo. As power dynamics shift and democracy faces repeated tests, the real question lingers. Will we choose the path of convenience that consumes ideals or the one that builds lasting safeguards for generations ahead?